YouTube, what's going on? In this video, we are going to be talking about, should you be training to failure? When you're doing your workouts, when you're doing your exercises, when you're doing your sets, should you be taking your sets to failure? Should you be not able to lift one more rep? Should you be dropping the weight on you? Should you be pushing super hard? Or should you maybe stay away from failure and not do it too much, or maybe do it sometimes? We're going to talk about all that in this video, okay? So number one, we're going to talk about what true failure actually means, because I want to make sure you just really understand what true failure means. It might be simple, but I want to make sure you understand. Number two, we're going to cover something called working versus warm-up. And then over here, we're going to talk about exactly what you should do. Talk about every single set, talking about separating things, types of exercises, all of that good stuff. So without further ado, let's dive right into the video. Number one, true failure. Here's what I would say. Most individuals that are going to watch this, including myself, most individuals don't know what true failure actually looks like. And what I mean by that is oftentimes our brains are going to say, hey, cut that, stop doing that. Like, you don't have any more, right? When in reality, we can always probably do a little bit more. They did a study on people with the bench press, okay, the bench press exercise. And they did a study where they told people, hey, put on your 10 rep max. So, essentially, how much weight can you put on to do 10 reps max? Literally every single person in the study did more than 10 reps. Some people got 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 reps. So what does that tell you? We think we can't do something, but when we actually get pushed to it, we can actually do it. If somebody, let's say they thought 225 was their bench press weight they could do for 10 reps max, and they got 22 reps, they weren't anywhere near actually going to true failure at 10 reps. They had 12 reps or 8 reps or 9 reps left in the tank. They had 10 reps left in reserve. So that shows us most individuals, because it's just really hard to go to true failure and our brains just don't really want to do it. Most people don't know what true failure actually looks like. Things might be hard and that's normal, but going to true failure is something where if you haven't ever done it, you don't truly know what it means. And I don't mean for example, if you can't do a push-up right now, I don't mean that, right? If you're somebody who you can't do a push-up on the ground yet, if you can't do that yet, I don't mean that way. I mean, let's say you're doing a set of bicep curls or a set of shoulder presses or whatever the case may be, right? And you're like, man, this is getting really hard. I don't think I can do anymore. But if you actually pushed, you could get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more, easily. And so what I always try to tell people is find a way to, before you worry about anything else, you have to find a way to safely replicate true failure. And you have to go to true failure. This could be something, if, for example, if you can do push-ups right now, take a set of push-ups to failure, absolute failure. And don't just do half-ass push-ups and just keep bumping them out. No, good reps, but take a set of push-ups all the way to failure, where you literally can't, your arms are shaking and you can't, push yourself back up. That is a way to safely get to true failure, because what's going to happen? You're just going to drop to the floor, right? You just drop to your knees and just that, you're not going to hurt yourself, right? Or let's say, for example, you're doing a squat with a barbell on your back, right? You could set the safety racks up on the squat rack to set it to where, if you squat down and the bar comes to right here, you could set the safety racks to right here. So if you have to eventually just drop the weight or just kind of go all the way down, you're not gonna crumble underneath the bar. They're gonna drop on the safety racks and you'll be good to go. Or you can have a spotter or whatever the case may be. But finding a way to replicate this could be doing a bicep curl and just having very strict form, but going to true failure where you literally can't get another rep and you're really struggling. Unless you know what true failure actually feels like and what it looks like, you won't know if you're getting anywhere close to it or not, because you don't know what true failure actually is. And so kind of a prerequisite to all this, we have to make sure that you know what true failure feels like. Again, do it safely. I don't need you going into the gym and doing 20 rep sets on a barbell deadlift. You're just gonna absolutely ruin your back. You know what I mean? So find a way to do it safely, but finding a way to get to true failure is going to be how if you're actually training to failure or not. And again, most people underestimate what they can do. They think they can do 225 for 10 reps. In reality, they got 18 reps. So that actually wasn't to failure for them. You know what I mean? So that's what I'd say number one. I think it's super important. And again, if you can find a way to do it safely, please do it. So that's number one. And that's going to kind of set up the other things we're going to talk about here. So number two, we have to differentiate this very quickly. I want to differentiate a warm-up set versus a working set, because not all of the sets are created equal. So let's just take that 225 bench press, for example. If you are going to bench press 225, let's say set number one, you do the bar for 5 reps. Let's say set number two, you do 135 for 5 reps. Let's say set number three, you do 185 for 3 reps. And then set number 4, you do 225. And that's like your working set. Well, set 1, set 2, and set 3, those were not working sets. Those were just warm-up sets. Those sets don't count towards your actual program, the warm-up sets. So let's just say, for example, you had 3 sets of 5 reps on your bench press, right? So that 135 and that 185, that didn't count towards your 3 sets of 5 reps. That did not count. That did not count towards your 3 sets of 5 reps, and I want to make that very clear because oftentimes I get people asking me this question, but we have to differentiate what is a warm-up set versus a working set. A working set is going to be, we're going to talk about this here in a second over here, but a working set is when you're actually having the weight that you're using that all right, cool, this is where I'm pushing myself. Whereas opposed to if you're just working your way up to the weight that you want to get to, that's not a working set. That is a warm-up set. So we have to make sure those two things are considered and known first, because again, I often get confusion of and again, we'll talk about this over here, but should I go to failure on the last set only, or all the sets, or some of the sets, or whatever? Just make sure you know that there's a difference between a warm-up set and a working set. A working set is taking, pretty much close to failure. A warm-up set is that doesn't count towards your actual program. None of that volume, which is just volume means sets and reps. None of that volume counts towards your actual workout program. So if your workout program says 3 sets of 5 reps, 135 and 185, that did not count towards your actual program. When you get to 225, that's what counts. And so just making sure we understand that as well. And now, diving right into it over here, what should you do? Well, typically speaking, here's what I recommend, what the research shows and all that kind of stuff. You should be taking, if you're doing a working set, I kind of already said it. If you're doing a working set, you should be taking your working sets anywhere between 1 to 3, maybe even 0 to 3 reps shy of failure. So let me kind of dive into this really quickly. There is something called the RIR scale, and it stands for reps in reserve, RIR, reps in reserve. This essentially means, all right, if you're doing a set of 10 reps, when you get done that 10th rep, you have to make sure, if you're doing a working set, you have to make sure you're saying and you're realizing, man, I maybe could have done 1, 2, or 3 more reps max. That would mean, let's say you got done a set and you're like, man, I could have done 2 more reps. That would be a 2 RIR, okay? Let's say you got done a set of 10 reps, you're like, if I really pushed myself, I could have gotten maybe 5 or 6 more. That's an RIR of 5 or 6. That would be considered a warm-up set because you're not pushing yourself close enough to failure for it to account for a working set. Are we understanding here? So again, if you're doing a working set, you should be taking every set within 0 to 3 RIR. So you should get done your set, whether it's a set of 5, a set of 8, a set of 10, whatever. You should get done that set and say, I maybe could have done 1, 2, or 3 more reps max. And again, this is going back to over here. For you to be able to do this, you have to know what true failure actually is, because oftentimes people think, oh man, I only had 2 reps left. And then something happens and they do 1 more and they do 1 more and they do 1 more and they do 1 more. They're like, holy shit, I had 4, 5, 6 reps left. Okay, that actually wasn't a 1 or a 2 RIR. That was actually a 6 or a 7 RIR. And this is where you kind of get into this concept of working out but not necessarily seeing the best results you want to see because you think, for example, you think you're going very close to failure, but you're not actually going very close to failure because either you don't know what failure actually feels like or you're just underestimating your RIR. Like you could have done 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more reps if you really pushed yourself. So you want to make sure you are taking your working sets within 0 to 3 RIR, and a 0 RIR means like you essentially failed that rep. So if you're doing a bicep curl, like you could not get that last rep up, that would be a 0 RIR. And so every working set should basically be taken close to failure. Now, when talking about like, should you take all of those sets, some of those sets, so on and so forth, here's what I'd say. Very rarely, myself or my clients, very rarely do we say, all right, we're gonna go to complete failure every single set. Like I don't really know of it's like going to failure, it's very taxing on your body, it's very taxing on your nervous system, it's very taxing on your muscular system. You better make sure you're able to recover from it. And so I wouldn't necessarily, go from every single set going to failure. I would probably stay within that, 1 to 3 RIR range. Because if you have a 0 RIR, then obviously you're failing, right? So I'd probably try to keep most of your sets within that 1 to 3 RIR range. Now, there very well may be some times where you're going to complete failure and you can't get the rep up or whatever the case may be. But oftentimes you want to stay within that 1 to 3 RIR for all of your sets. And now we also have to remember, we have to separate working sets versus warm-up sets, right? That's why I covered this first. You have to be able to separate. If you're doing dumbbell shoulder press, for example, and let's say, set 1 is at 1 set of 10 reps with 30 pounds, set 2 is at one set of 10 reps at 40 pounds, and then set 3 is a set of 10 reps at 30 pounds, or at 50 pounds, I'm sorry. So again, let me say it one more time. Set 1, 10 reps, 30 pounds. Set 2, 10 reps, 40 pounds. Set 3, 10 reps, 50 pounds. Remember, we have to separate. Set 1 and set 2, you clearly weren't going to failure on those. You weren't going close to failure because if you're going 30, 40, 50, if your last set is the heaviest weight, that's your first set. It wasn't these 2 sets right here because those 2 sets were not taken to failure. So those 2 sets do not count. You only did that 1 set. So instead of having these, what I tell my clients is, let's say, for example, let's take that same situation. Let's say you're working up to 50 pounds for 10 reps on a shoulder press, right? Let's say you're doing that and you want to kind of warm up first. Cool. What you would do is say, all right, cool. I'm going to grab the 20s and I'm going to do a set of 5 reps. I'm going to grab the 35s and I'll do a set of 5 reps. Those 2 things are your warm-up sets. Great. Get into your heavy sets now. Get into your working sets. Do your 50 pounds for 3 sets of 8 or whatever your program calls for. Like get into your working sets and don't spend all of this time. Like you should have some warm-up sets and there's nothing wrong with that because you want to get the form down, make sure the muscle's working, all of that stuff. But remember, you got to separate what is a working set versus a warm-up set. And something I see so often is like, oh, well, I'm going to do 30 pounds, 40 pounds, 50 pounds. And like that, you only did 1 set. You only really did 1 working set. So those 2 other sets do not count. So just kind of keep that in mind and be able to separate those 2 things to where if your program, again, it depends on your program, but if your program calls for 3 sets of 10 reps, realize you doing 30 pounds and 40 pounds for 10 reps, that doesn't count towards your program. That doesn't count towards your 3 sets of 10 reps or whatever your program is calling for. It doesn't count towards that. Those are warm-up sets. You want 3 sets of 10 reps that are working sets. So you have to make sure you separate that, number 2. Now, number 3, talking about going to failure on certain exercises. Typically speaking, you can go more closer to failure on your accessory / isolation movements. So let's take a squat versus a bicep curl, for example. Taking a squat to actual failure where you can't get up from a squat, number 1, it's way more injury risk, right? Your risk of injury goes higher because the barbell in your back is literally pushing you down on the ground. You could get injured, those kind of things. It's also very taxing on your nervous system, on your neurological system, on your muscular system, on all of your systems because there's so much tissue working. Your legs, your hamstrings, your glutes, your quads, your core, your upper back, your lats. So much stuff is working, right? It's a very big compound movement and typically speaking, for the bigger compound movements, since you're able to work so much more tissue, you're going to have more weight. And the more weight you have and the more tissue you're working, the more neurologically and systematically demanding that exercise becomes. And then it takes longer to recover from, it takes more to recover from, so on and so forth, right? Now, let's take a bicep curl. A bicep curl, like your squat, you could squat hundreds of pounds. A bicep curl, unless you're like, I don't know, a bodybuilder with steroids, you're not curling 100-pound dumbbells, right? You're curling 10, 15, 20, 25-pound dumbbells, right? If you go to failure on a 20-pound dumbbell curl, number one, your risk of injury is so much lower. Like what's going to happen? You're just going to like drop the dumbbell eventually, right? So you're just not going to get it up, right? So the risk of injury is super low, and how taxing it is on your body for your body to recover from is way less, because you're taxing this small muscle right here, and like, it's not too small, but you're taxing this small muscle right here, as opposed to essentially taxing your entire body. So your body does not have to recover from as much, because you're taxing a specific tissue as opposed to taxing your entire body. So from a muscular standpoint and from a neurological and nervous system standpoint, it's much less taxing to take your isolation / accessory movements closer to, if not failure, as opposed to your more, bigger compound movements. And so I would say for, things like squats, deadlifts, bench press, those kind of things, staying in that 1 to 3 RIR range, typically not going to complete failure. And then for your, if you want to take a side lateral raise to failure, like what's going to happen? You're just going to not be able to get it up, and like your body, it won't tax your body that much. So from like an exercise standpoint, maybe think about that as well when you're, considering what do I take to failure, what do I not take to failure, so on and so forth, right? So that is number 3. And then number 4, again, if your main goal is to build strength and build muscle, you got to make sure you're having that 1 to 3 RIR. I've done an entire video on like learning how much weight you should be lifting. So if you want to check that out, feel free to check it out. But if your main goal is to build strength and build muscle, drop my pen, marker. If your main goal is to build strength and build muscle, you need to make sure you are taking your sets close to failure, because if not, essentially how your body works is, and you might have heard me say this before, but essentially how your body works is your body is able to create this stress, right? So when you work out, you put stress in your body. You have to create enough stress and almost like hit this threshold and like tick this thing off where it's like, all right, there's stress, there's stress, there's stress, there's stress. All right, you know what? Enough stress. Once you hit that threshold of stress, your body's going to say, all right, we got to adapt to this. And this is why progressive overload is so important, and so on and so forth. But your body's going to hit a point where it says, oh shit, like, the tank is full. That meter is full. We got to make sure we adapt to this, because this stress is high enough for us to cause an adaptation. And that adaptation is, again, getting stronger, more defined muscles. So you have to make sure you hit that threshold of stress, that threshold of stimulus. And then once you hit that, that's how your body's going to change. But the only way you're going to hit that for a muscular and strength-based adaptation is making sure you push your muscles close enough to failure during your workouts. That's how you hit that threshold, and basically, you trigger that process of like your body says it's enough stress, your body starts to recover from it, your body then adapts to it, right? And that's how you change your physique. And so if that's your main goal, changing the way your body looks, getting stronger, you got to make sure you're lifting close enough to failure. And again, this is why I started by talking about knowing what true failure feels like, because unless you know what true failure is, you don't really know how close you're getting to it. So just keep that in mind. It's super important. I think if you're watching this video, that is probably your main goal. So make sure you keep that in mind, and it's super important to have that happen. All right, so that is, should you be training to failure on your sets? Remember, most of your sets should go to between 1 to 3 RIR. And again, if you want to learn more about RIR and those kind of things, I did an entire video on that, so feel free to check that out. But most of your sets going close to 1 to 3 RIR. Separate working sets versus warm-up sets, and also don't spend too much energy on your warm-up sets. For example, I see so many times people are like, all right, well, I want to work up to 225 on my bench press for 10 reps or whatever the case may be. And so they go 135 for 10 reps, 165 for 10 reps, 185 for 10 reps. And by the time they get to 225, they're absolutely burnt out, right? So let's say, for example, you want to work up to 225, do the bar for like 4 reps, do 135 for 4 reps, do 185 for 2 reps, and then when you get to 225, you'll have much more energy, stamina, endurance, all that. You haven't used as much energy, so you'll have more energy for your actual working sets. So just kind of keep that in mind as well. Don't burn yourself out on warm-up sets, especially with weight and with reps. Like, You don't need to be doing 10 reps on a warm-up set. Do like 3, 4, 5 reps, get the movement down, and then move on to your working sets. All right, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them below. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let me know below. All right.